Palestinian authorities called for an international investigation into the discovery of mass graves at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, where 392 bodies of people killed by the Israeli occupation army were found. In the United States, police repressed students from at least 4 universities in the country who are demonstrating to demand that the government stop its funding and support for the genocide committed by Israel in Palestine. And the InterAmerican Commission on Human Rights has demanded the lifting of U.S. sanctions against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Friday, Palestinian authorities called for an international investigation into the discovery of mass graves at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, where 392 bodies of people killed by the Israeli occupation army were found. In this regard, civil defense officials detailed that 10 of the bodies found showed signs of having received medical treatment. Others showed signs of torture, while about 20 showed signs of having been buried alive, including children. On the other hand, ambulance and rescue teams reported suspicions that some of the victims had been subjected to organ theft based on sutures found on the bodies. After the discovery of the mass graves, the United Nations, the European Union, and countries such as Colombia, the United States, and France called for an independent investigation into the matter.
These executions in the Nasser medical complex make us demand an international investigation in this matter. We therefore call on the United Nations Secretary-General and international institutions to create an independent international investigation committee to investigate the crimes committed in the Gaza Strip. And we are fully prepared to participate in any international committee.
Likewise, civil defense officials Yamen Abu Suleiman urged the international community to exert pressure on Israel to stop its crimes in the Gaza Strip.
After 202 days of war, we ask the international community to put pressure and immediately stop this aggression against our people, and to allow the entry of all the human rights centers of the world and the international press to denounce these crimes. After 202
On the
days
other hand, the Palestinians identified their deceased relatives in Al-Najjar hospital after their death due to the continuous attacks of the Israeli occupation army on the city of Rafah. In this regard, humanitarian groups warned that Israel's plans to enter the city of Rafah, which is home to most of the displaced Gazans, would create an apocalyptic situation.
I have nothing to say to you except to keep protesting to pressure the Biden administration to end this war. This war must end. Unfortunately, children are the main victims of this war. The enemy does not achieve any objective without killing innocents. 80% of the victims are children and women.
In the United States, police repress students from at least 4 universities in the country who are demonstrating to demand that government stop its funding and support for the genocide committed by Israel in Palestine. Police beat and arrested dozens of students from Ohio State University who are holding an encampment to denounce Israeli crimes. On the other hand, at least 2 female professors at Emory University in Atlanta were assaulted and arrested earlier in the day. In the last few days, more than 400 students and professors have been arrested at universities in California, Massachusetts, Texas, and New York. Despite police harassment, opposition to the genocide in Gaza continues to resound loudly on campuses, and more encampments are being registered at universities. Protests and encampments in solidarity with the Palestinian people are taking place in at least 19 universities in the United States. Students at Columbia University in New York were the first to demonstrate, setting up dozens of tents and Palestinian flags on campus on April 17th. As the days went by, activists at Harvard, Berkeley, Yale, the University of Southern California, and the University of Texas at Austin, among others, joined in. And another demonstration in support of the Palestinian people continued on Friday morning at Sciences Po Paris in France, where students spent the night in the school's historic building. The Palestine Committee of the Research University scheduled a press conference for Friday morning, calling for the clear condemnation of Israel's actions by the institution and the end of collaboration with all the entities deemed complicit in the systemic oppression of the Palestinian people. On Wednesday evening, a dozen tents had been set up in the courtyard of another school of the school's building before the police came to dislodge the activists and supporters of the Palestinian cause. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. The InterAmerican Commission on Human Rights has demanded the lifting of U.S. sanctions against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. The autonomous OAS agency's demand was made through a report issued on Thursday, 3 years after the United Nations rapporteur Alena Dohan had warned that the sanctions had no normative basis in international law and had worsened the situation of vulnerable people in the Latin American nation. According to the president of the Venezuelan parliament, Jorge Rodriguez, from 2015 to 2023, 962 sanctions of various kinds were imposed by the U.S. government on the Bolivarian nation. Venezuela left the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights 3 years ago. In Venezuela, the United Socialist Party mobilized in rejection of the United States criminal sanctions and in support of President Nicolás Maduro in the state of Portuguesa. The first vice president of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, joined the mobilizations this Friday. Hundreds of people rallied and marched through the municipality to show their support for the Bolivarian government. The party's youth commission pointed out that they will continue with the legacy of President Hugo Chavez. Likewise, the social organizations of the Popular Power and Communes confirmed that they will participate in the upcoming presidential elections of July 28th.
On July the 28th, this organized people, the people of Portuguesa, the people of Turin, the people of Venezuela are going to give them a new lesson, a lesson of popular victory. That is why we listen. We listen to Ali Primera when he says, "I'm not staying home because to the combat I go." Every day the enemy is the same. Imperialism, lackeys, the desire of imperialism to take over all of our wealth, and we are also the same. But we have learned during these long struggles, during these long days, we have learned to fight, to resist, and to overcome. Chavez taught us to fight, to resist, and to overcome.
In Guatemala, the Special Prosecutor's Office Against Impunity ordered a raid on the offices of a non-governmental organization being investigated for possible child trafficking. The head of the Special Prosecutor's Office, Rafael Curruchiche, indicated that the operation was coordinated in conjunction with the National Civil Police and that it was in response to a complaint filed against the agency. Although the name was not specified, the images on social networks showed that the raided offices belonged to the non-governmental organization Save the Children. Curruchiche insisted on the commitment of the Public Prosecutor's Office to fight for the integrity and protection of Guatemalan children.
This case starts as a result of a complaint through which the public minister is informed that some facts have been allegedly committed against Guatemalan children and adolescents. This is due to the fact that the Public Prosecutor's Office has initiated this investigation, which is still in progress.
Brazil's largest indigenous mobilization, Tierra Libre Camp, reaches its last day in Brasilia. For a week, the native peoples insisted on the demarcation of their territories. Our team tells us more.
For the last 20 years, indigenous people from all over Brazil have been meeting in the Federal District of Brazil at the Freeland Camp. The largest indigenous event of a country with continental scale, this year, gathered more than 6,000 representatives from more than 200 communities.
In these 20 years, one of the most remarkable things is the strength that multiplies. Every year, the indigenous people of Brazil get stronger together. This is something that gives importance to the collective struggle of all of us, even with our diversity, with our territories in different regions, are here fighting for the same cause, which is the demarcation of our territories so that we can honor our ancestral memory.
The communities denounced in the Congress the legal thesis of the temporary framework, approved by the Agribusiness Parliamentary Front, a measure that jeopardizes the right of indigenous people to the demarcation of their lands. On the other hand, despite the progress made with the demarcation of 8 territories during the Lula administration, during a meeting with the president, the native people demanded speed in the demarcation of 6 more indigenous lands that have been promised by the president in his first years in office.
This year, in the current era of President Lula, we vote for him. At the meeting, I took the opportunity. Our situation has improved for the ethnic group, but we still need demarcation, and we talk about this issue. Health also improved. Now it is coordinated by the indigenous people themselves, but there are still problems.
A report published this week by the Pastoral Land Commission reveals that 2023 was a record year for violence in the countryside. 70% of the cases were due to land conflicts. Indigenous and traditional people are the most affected by violence.
We are in the struggle and we go through a lot of violence, discrimination, prejudice. Just yesterday we received very sad news here in the camp. Gunmen attacked our village while the indigenous health secretary was working.
During the last 30 years, their territories in Brazil lost only 1% of their native vegetation, while in private properties, the destruction is exceeding 20%. At a time when the planet is moving towards collapse, the native people are telling the world that the future is indigenous.
Ignacio Lemus y Pedro Viaba para teleSUR.
In Brazil, at least 10 people have died and 11 are injured after a major fire at a homeless shelter in southeastern city of Porto Alegre. The chief of the Rio Grande do Sul State Fire Department, Lucia Juanes da Silva, informed that the flames were extinguished after 2 hours. The official indicated that the investigations into the cause of the fire are still underway and that the 3-story building was completely destroyed. The rescue team assured that the exact number of victims is still unknown, since the place offered shelter to vulnerable people sleeping on the streets and did not have a registration plan for its guests. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. People in Tanzania's capital, Dar es Salaam, say the situation is really scary after heavy rains linked to El Niño triggered flooding and landslides, killing at least 155 citizens. Tanzania and other countries in East Africa, a region highly vulnerable to climate change, have been pounded by heavier than usual rainfall during the current rainy season, with several dozen deaths also reported in Kenya. Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa said more than 200,000 people have been affected by the disaster in Tanzania, with 155 fatalities and 236 people injured. Homes, property, crops, and infrastructure such as roads, bridges, railways, and schools have been damaged or destroyed. The United Nations issued warnings over escalating tensions in Sudan after threats by the rapid support forces to resort to violence to control the town of El Fasher north of Darfur. The United Nations Special Envoy for Sudan affirmed that they have warned both the rapid support forces and the army not to have confrontations in the area in order to avoid massacres among civilians. After the wave of violence due to the clashes between the parties, the authorities have confirmed that a large number of Sudanese population is concentrated in El Fasher as a result of forced displacement. Recent data from the organization indicate that civilians in Sudan are on the verge of starvation, with women and girls being victims of threats and violence. In Zimbabwe, the government recently confirmed that it will expand diplomatic energy and economic relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Local media stated that a government delegation arrived in Tehran to participate in the Iran Africa International Economic Conference. The delegation is scheduled to meet with Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi and some of the country's top political leaders. The mission also expects to address diplomatic and economic issues for which several investors' exploratory meetings have already been scheduled. On Friday marks the 30th anniversary of South African leader Nelson Mandela winning the 1994 presidential election, ending the racist apartheid system in South Africa. At the age of 75, Mandela would win the African country's first free elections, being endorsed by his African National Congress Party and being sworn in as head of state on May 10, 1994. During his life, Nelson Mandela was known for being an activist committed to fight against segregation in his country and for always advocating for the rights of the black population in South Africa and the world. Despite being sentenced to almost 30 years in prison, the lawyer and activist was always against promoting hatred and resentment towards white people, imposing instead a pacifist message that led him to be awarded with a Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. Nelson Mandela, South Africa's first black head of state, in his inauguration speech called for an end to racial oppression and advocated for his nation's freedom.
Never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another and suffer the indignity of being the scum of the world. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa. I thank you.
And we continue with the world of sports, in this case in Greece. President of the Hellenic Olympic Committee, Spyros Kapralos, handed the Olympic torch to the President of the Paris 2024 Olympics and Paralympics Organizing Committee, Tony Stanget. On Friday, Greece handed over the Olympic flame of the 2024 Games to Paris organizers in a ceremony at the Athens Marble Stadium, where the competition was revived nearly 130 years ago. Hellenic Olympic Committee Chairman Spyros Kapralos handed the torch to Paris Olympics chiefs organizer Tony Stanget at the Panathinaik Stadium, where the first modern Olympics were held in 1896. Stanget assured the goal for Paris was to organize a spectacular but also more responsible games, which will contribute towards a more inclusive society. In this context, an 800-strong show of light drones and fireworks on the theme of Olympic fire is taking place in Marseille to celebrate the handover of the Olympic flame from Greece to France in Athens. Nana Mouskouri, the 89-year-old Greek singer with a worldwide following, performed the anthems of France and Greece at the ceremony. Organizers want to ensure that the biggest event in the world plays an accelerating role in addressing the crucial questions of our time. In Argentina, the 48th edition of Buenos Aires Book Fair was inaugurated on Thursday under the slogan Book, Culture and Democracy. Organizers of the activity strongly criticized the government of Javier Milei for cutting funding to culture. The president of the organizing foundation, Alejandro Vaccaro, also highlighted the plural character of the fair, but at the same time warned that its survival is at risk after almost half a century given the country's political context. In this way, Vaccaro underscored the position of the book fair as a space of cultural resistance and stated the foundation would not undertake the extra expenses generated by the president's presence at the event.
El presidente de la nación, luego de despreciar nuestra feria,
the president of the nation, after despising our fair, does not blush and asks to participate in this space, and his presence is scheduled for next Sunday, May 12, at the Central Arena of La Rural. His participation in the fair, an extraordinary showcase, implies a series of extraordinary expenses, which the Book Foundation cannot afford. Mr. President, I tell you with one hand on my heart, there is no money. Attending the fair this year represents another rebellion and resistance as never before. This cultural and activist space will be the central axis around which the repudiation of cultural forces to the devastating policies proposed by this government will revolve.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.